Helen Hunt stars in the second season of Blindspotting on Stars. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. Helen, we haven't talked to you about this series before, so I want to start just by asking you, take us back to that very first episode when you got the script for Blindspotting. What about your character, Rainey, really jumped off the page at you, and what about the series really wanted to make you sign on?
I mean, the story starts before that first script because I had become friends with Raphael and David. I saw the movie of Blindspotting. That's probably where it started. I paid my money and saw it in the theater and loved it. And I posted something about it on Twitter because one of the good things about social media is you can lift up your own work that people might not be seeing or other people's work. And I just loved it. And then Rafa messaged me. Someone taught me how to message him back. And next thing you know, we were having coffee and we talked like you always do about it would be great to work together because we had a lot of the same things that interested us that we wanted to make work about. But I think the two of us are the rare person who's actually like, I'm following through on that. Well, I'm following through on that. So that's sort of how it started. A couple of other things we were going to work on together. We became friends, especially, and then over COVID, David and Rafa and I spent a lot of outside time watching movies, laying on my small lawn out there. And along the way, they were talking about Blindspotting as a TV series. And I thought, I don't think that's a good idea. I think they did it already. And then they told me they were going to center it on Jasmine's character and on the family. And he lightly mentioned the mother a couple of times and like it was a joke. And I didn't say anything and he didn't say anything. And then we had the night that Stars bought it or picked it up or whatever, we had a champagne. And then, I don't know, a week or two after that, he was like, so separate from all the joking, do you want to play this part? So then we got into a big, long talk about what that would be like and what she would be like. And then I raised whatever concerns or thoughts I had. They were open to them. And then along the way, in the middle of the conversation, I was like, well, I'll do it. And David said, can we go back a few minutes? I think you just said you'd do it. And so it was it grew, the way few jobs do for me, like the best possible way, out of friendships and shared sensibility. And then I did get an early outline, maybe first, or maybe a script, I'm not sure. And, this is their work 100%. And I have a perspective they don't have, about a couple of things. And they were very interested in that as a woman, as an older woman. And it just seemed like everything, the title. I have a friend who says when you're working on something, always come back to the title. I feel like they found blind spots in me. I found blind spots in them. And we try, and the script changed based on waking up to those blind spots. And I don't know, the next thing you know, I was in like bright blue leggings dancing in the street. So somewhere along the way, we really jumped in and decided to do this.
We meet your character at such a precarious moment for the whole family, and circumstances have changed a lot in the two seasons. We're talking now after the season 2 finale has aired. I just wanted to ask you, how do you think the character has changed over the 16 episodes? What do you feel as an actress, is different about Rainey from where you started to where she is now?
I don't know how much she's changed overall. She's changed Ashley maybe, and she's been through a lot. Well, I mean, there's God, we decided early on she was a meditator and a seeker and all these things, but no thank you to God. And then, her situation becomes so desperate that halfway through season 2, she just goes, I guess I'll try this thing I don't believe in. And so that, the whole show is about how these excruciating circumstances wear down, tear apart, sometimes bring together, but often tear apart families. And this is a family that is clawing to stay intact through this nightmare. And it's funny somehow. And there's dance and there's song and there's spoken word. I just feel, I don't usually tell people to watch things I'm in. There's too many things on TV, but this is a special show, I think. And it's like, I keep thinking of it as a bouquet, like this generous bouquet of what you get for your 30 minutes,
It is so unique. And let's dive into that episode you're talking about, which is the third episode, where your character does turn, she turns to painting because she finds that really grounds her, but she's still kind of
weed.
struggling.
She turns to a lot of weed.
She's really struggling in this moment. And we get that absolutely beautiful scene, as you mentioned, of spoken word, where she turns to God and attempts to pray, which is something that she's not comfortable or well versed in. Talk to us. I have a lot of questions on that, but talk first about just preparing to do that spoken word piece. I mean, it's so kind of, I think, different for your character in that, as outspoken as she usually is, this is really kind of peeling back even, what she holds back from other characters for the sake of holding the family together. It's as raw as we've seen her. So just talk about preparing for that moment.
I mean, beautiful writing is easier to act and learn than clunky writing. This was beautiful writing. So I just read it 100 times and recorded it and listened to it 100 times and just started to fill it in with whatever images would come to me. And I was lucky to get it quite a bit ahead of time, which is rare. So I really got to soak in it. And I just, as painful as it was, I enjoyed being in that language, and it's fun. And I know a lot about musical theater. I've been around it my whole life. And they say in musical theater or in opera, you only sing when you cannot express what you have to express by speaking. And this is sort of that. I think what she's feeling is so razor sharp, and she feels so alone in it that she can only express it in this way. So it was actually a pleasure to work on. Yeah, he's a beautiful writer. He really is.
The way it's put together is too and shot is so beautiful that
Mhm.
really far, it must be a crane shot, correct me if I'm wrong, but the really far away kind of, it has a godly, as if your character is praying, speaking to God, and we really push in slowly and get really close. I mean, it's just so well put together. The composition is great. I wanted to talk to you about that too, doing direct address to the camera. I don't know how often you get to do that on a series, but how does that change, how you approach the material? And talk about too the shots as a director. You're a prolific director in your own right. Talk about, talking the conversations with your director and just what that would look like and how that factored into, preparing for the performance.
This was our director's first episode ever that she directed of TV, so that deserves the highest praise. And in terms of acting into the camera, so often when you're acting, you have to, you're talking to a piece of tape or you're talking to someone that you love acting with, but it's the 50th time you've done it. So in a way, I could turn that camera into whatever I wanted to. It's also just a group of people who want to make it good and want to make it fun all the time. And that's really great. You can find on a set, there's somebody who just weaves their own trouble into the process. And that's not the case here. Everybody is, like they say, lifting each other up. And I felt we didn't really talk about it much. The writing was so good, we didn't talk about it. I just showed up and did it. I suppose if they'd said, "What are you doing? This is not at all what we wanted," I wouldn't have known what I would have done. But I really just showed up and brought the work I'd done and, spoke the truth.
This moment in this episode comes at the same time as Ashley and Miles are having a family visit, a 48-hour family visit. And we've heard earlier that Rainey is kind of being kept out of that process. Ashley's really protecting that for herself and her son, even though, Rainey wants to spend time with her son. Talk about, as Rainey and as you're looking at the material, preparing to kind of walk this tightrope and a balance of, you know, as a mother wanting to be with her son who's incarcerated, but also understanding, where his wife is coming from. It's a really challenging position for Rainey to be in, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, the fun of it from the beginning has been that Jasmine's character is tightly wound and I'm loud and bright colored and saying the thing that no one should say. And that's been a lot of the fun of both seasons. The first season, young Atticus, my grandson in it, he was sort of my focus of the whole thing. Like how do you keep his spirit up when his dad is gone and in a cage? And the second one has more really to do with me and her and two people who have the same enemy and love the same person. And there's only a scrap. So who gets the scrap, And it's probably right that the other character gets the scrap, but that speech is really about how painful that is.
You mentioned the series is a bouquet, and you're right. It's fun how much stylized work we get, as you said, there's choreography, there's spoken word, there's direct address. And one of the episodes this season is set kind of in the gold rush period. It's so much fun. Talk about embodying that. I mean, you get to do something, it's such a departure for the show, but it's so in keeping with, the kind of spirit of what the series is doing. You get to go back in time. You're kind of a bar matron. Talk about just having fun in something like that, because I feel like it gives you free reign to just explore and have a great time.
Yeah, it was fun. And to leap into a style like that completely, everybody was ready to do it. It was directed by Raphael, and we're all sort of behind him 1,000%. So it was just a leap of faith that wasn't hard to take, and if it didn't work, it didn't work. It's that kind of feeling, and no one's even thinking about if it's working or not. They're just throwing themselves into it. But in the middle of it is all the same stuff. They want to be together. She wants to rescue him. The boy's seeing his dad in a cage. It's all the same. The mother's protective. So it was a departure, but not totally.
How much, as I mentioned, you've directed so much films of your own and TV series and other people's writing, um, and you act on this, but how much do you kind of peek behind the camera, what's going on, and try to learn, and also, do you give input? I mean, what is that like for you, who has talent in so many different, ways, to try to, glean what you can and absorb and maybe, give some advice?
Yeah, I mean, mostly I'm acting, and I'm keeping an eye on how long till I act. Partly because everybody wants to go home and go to bed, but also it's a tricky thing on a movie set. If you're doing a play, the curtain goes up at 8. I have to eat at 6. At 7, I have to warm up my voice. I have to go to bed at 1. Like it's super predictable, and you can come in ready to go at 7 a.m. and at 5 p.m. they knock on your door. They're ready, and you're like, I was ready hours ago. So part of what you keep your eye on as an actor is that. I don't know that anybody needed my advice. I did work with our director on that 3rd episode about where would I be sitting and where exactly the camera would be, just because I knew that making a relationship with that camera early on was super important. And it was fun to watch Raphael. I mean, he did his first episode last year. I'm sure he was nervous, but nobody, especially me, had a single doubt that he'd be overqualified. And he was in the episode too, so I did tell him I made 2 movies that I was in, so I gave him my 2 cents about what that was like. I don't even know if he used it or needed it, but it's such an open, happy group that nobody was, prickly about it.
You directed the first episode of the Mad About You reboot revival that you were also starring in. Um, would you be interested in doing that for an episode in season 3 of Blindspotting?
Mm.
I'm sure the pressure is, enormously harder when you're acting in something that you're directing, but what kind of ideas do you have as a potential director, to bring to such a unique and stylized show?
I mean, my basic thing would be to bring what's on the page to life, and I have a little say about what's on the page. They are often interested in my perspective, but then it's the writing. It's however it comes out. Speaking of writing and the importance of writing, that's kind of everything. And then as a director, you just try to not get in the way of it and try to make it possible, especially on this show, for this new idea to like take flight. So I'm usually not in every episode too, so it wouldn't necessarily mean I'd have to be in it. I don't know. I kind of feel like send me in where I'm needed, and if they needed a director, I'm there. And it's also really nice to go home earlier.
I bet. Let's talk about the end of the season, because it takes such interesting turns, and there's a beautiful kind of payoff to the season. In the penultimate episode, Rainey hears a pretty devastating truth about Ashley, and her relationship with Miles. And I just love the way you play it too, because it's very, she's absorbing the information. She's not really reacting. It kind of just hits her. It looks like it just hits her, and she doesn't. It kind of knocks her, speech away and her breath away. Talk
Yeah, for
about
someone who
playing that
talks so
moment.
much, they were smart to not have her talk.
Yeah, exactly. So talk about, seeing that on the page. I don't know how long you knew that was kind of coming in the arc of the season, but
Mhm.
when you saw it and, playing it as Rainey, it is, as you're saying, a bit out of character, her response. So just talk about, kind of embodying that.
Yeah, I think I spent the whole series, my character, like, we can do it, we can do it. And suddenly the person in the middle just like knocked over a kerosene lamp. Like, what are you doing? So I think that was sort of the feeling in the room. It was heartbreak for everybody. And then, I really related to the Ashley character in the last episode, because that feeling of like, am I family or not? That's kind of what is family, I guess, is the big question in the last episode, and I don't know how many people are watching this have seen it, but things happen that could make these lines be drawn. You're out, you're in, and I think we do that. We do you're out when it's too painful to keep people in our hearts. You know what I mean? So the one thing all these characters do is they keep like swinging viciously, comically, musically, but they keep swinging.
We can give a spoiler alert if you haven't seen the season finale. Pause this, go watch it, and come back,
Yes,
because I
and then
do
come
I do
back.
want I do want to get into that final
Hmm.
episode, because you have an absolutely terrific scene with Jasmine as Ashley, which is a confrontation on its face, but I feel like the two characters grow and develop and really kind of trust each other more at the end than where it started. First, just talk about exploring that material with Jasmine, because you get to do so much with her over the course of the seasons, but this is really feels like something different.
Yeah, I guess we both were, for better or worse, dialed into what we were doing. So we didn't really talk about it much. We showed up and poured ourselves in, and I think we both understand the intention of the show and how each of us feels well enough that we could do that, which was great. We don't like sit around and talk about how to play it. We just kind of jump in. And for me, what was moving about the whole thing is she's just is shame. She's in shame. And I know that feeling. I know being ashamed, but I also know that feeling of how hard it is to pierce someone who's being consumed by that particular horribly damaging. I don't even know if it's an emotion. It's like a virus or something. Um, so I related to that. Just every actor wants to know what their character wants, and my character wanted to break through this thing she's decided about how lovable she is or isn't, or how much she's in the family or not, or how much she's ruined everything or not. And the beautiful thing about this character they've written me is she will go anywhere. She will allow her point of view to get bigger and bigger and bigger if that's what it takes. Just don't shut her out. So it's a pretty fun part to play.
Yeah, I feel like it takes a lot of grace to have that conversation for both characters. It's a really hard moment, and it comes at what should be a really celebratory time for them. But it's unfortunate the way that it plays out for them. But I feel like for Rainey in particular, extending a lot of grace to Ashley and understanding. When you knew that was coming, how did it feel? Did you feel like that's how Rainey would respond? Did it surprise you? What about the material kind of
I mean, it did. What's
surprised
been
you?
so fun about this part is that, I have played controlled people. I've been a controlled person. And this is somebody who opens her big loud mouth and says what's true and uses humor, but doesn't mince words and speaks the truth. And that it's just such a relief, even if you're acting, to play someone who speaks the truth and makes an environment where other people can speak the truth. When I got the part and I knew there was this Bay Area culture that I was not from, I'm only from however many miles down the beach, but still it's different. And Oakland in particular, and their experience of this part of the world in particular. And I was like, how do I get it? And she was raised differently than me. And, it was a wig, and it was all going to the outfit, and it seemed very different. And I did a lot of work to feel like I could crawl in there and people would say, which they have, which has been great. Like, I know that woman in the Bay. I was told that Rafa's mom and David's mom have T-shirts called "I'm the Real Rainey." Say "I'm the Real Rainey." I don't know if that's true, but anyway, I wanted to get it right, and it felt like a real character. Then I got to the set, and I took off my own Birkenstocks and my own leggings, and put on her Birkenstocks and her leggings, and I played a scene where I'm, a big loud liberal opening her mouth, and I was like, oh, maybe it's not so different. And I've had that experience before. I've played characters that when I did As Good as It Gets, I thought she's very different than me. Like how she was raised is different than me, how she speaks, her sensibility. And then I realized, oh, she's incredibly damaged by the words people say to her, and incredibly healed by words people say to her. And she cares about her kid more than anything. And even though I didn't have a kid yet, I knew that would be true. So after all this hard work and dyeing your hair and picking out clothes and figuring out, seeing a dialect coach, you go, oh, it's me. It's also me. So I definitely had that experience with Rainey.
Well, she's a character, and you play it so well. Helen
Thank
Hunt,
you.
congratulations on Blind Spotting. Thanks for talking to Gold Ruby today.
Thanks so much.